Hey everybody, this is Erica, the technology nerd likes to film stuff, and it is time for the OnePlus 3 review. So I've used this exclusively for several days now, probably going on 2 weeks, and I really want to talk about it. This is a phone that I'm really enjoying so far. Also, please stay tuned for the giveaway because once this video is up, I will also be launching a giveaway so that you guys can claim this, or at least one of you guys can. So what this phone offers is a really nice Android phone for the price, 400 bucks. 400 bucks and you get a phone that looks like this. It's crazy that we are able to do that these days. But I think this is a visualization of what a phone can be, but not having to be 800 bucks, for example. So let's talk about the good points, the bad points, and hopefully I can help you decide if this is the phone for you. So let's go ahead and check it out. First and foremost, the thing to mention about this phone is that there is no more invite system. If you want to have this phone, you can go on their site and buy it. You don't have to wait for an invite or jump through any hoops. So they've really made improvements on that. Now first, let's get into the build quality and the design of this phone. Now I can't say what it is, but I have just grown to have a very strong bond with this particular device. There's just something about it that's just such a joy to use. When you hold it in the hand, that aluminum unibody feels really nice, really premium. It's very thin. At first, I wasn't so happy that it was really thin because you can see there's a bit of a camera hump sticking out. I figured, just like everyone else, that they could have put a bigger battery in there, 3,000 milliamp hour battery. But it just feels right in the hand. That subtle curve that you have here is just really nice, smooth as butter in the hand. You can see you've got just a little bit of a chamfer on the side. That's a nice touch. Then you've got this 2.5D Gorilla Glass 4. So I think that it's curved and angled in all the right places. It's a very simple, plain looking phone, but that is not a bad thing. So you can see you've got the antenna bands here so you can get reception. Right now it's in this graphite type of silver. We should have a soft goldish one later on. So starting with the back, we have a 16 megapixel camera, optical image stabilization. You have a single LED flash. You can see right here is a microphone. It now has NFC. Last year NFC was cut out. There is no inductive charging. Then on the bottom we have a speaker, we have a USB-C port, very fast charging, a microphone and a standard headphone jack. You can see that we've got little screws here. I don't know how easily this would be to repair, but hopefully not that bad because we do have access to these screws. Then on the front we have an 8 megapixel camera. You can see there's an LED here so that you can get notifications. This is the ambient light sensor / proximity sensor, your receiver. Here is the fingerprint sensor, which is made out of ceramic. So hopefully that shouldn't get all scratched up. Then you've got two navigation buttons at the bottom. You can see these little LEDs. What's cool is that if you don't want to use these, you can simply activate the on-screen buttons. But because it's an AMOLED display and I worry about burn-in, I decided to not have those. Then on the right side, we have a SIM tray. This is actually dual SIM, dual LTE. You've got your power button. There is no SD card, so it's 64 gigabytes max. We will get into talking about the storage, but at least it's very nice and quick, UFS 2.0 storage. Then you have your volume rocker, and you have a notification slider. This is probably one of my favorite parts of the whole phone. I love having a notification slider. I don't have to go fooling around with menus or anything like that. If I'm trying to be inconspicuous, then I can simply just slide it up a few and get it to be in silent mode, or right here, this puts it in priority mode. I do wish there was an option to switch these around because it would make more sense to have it the opposite direction, but they still have not added that ability. In design, the one thing that really bothers me about having the speaker at the bottom is that it's so easy to cover up. Most games play in this orientation instead of the other way, and so my palm just covers it. No matter how I hold it, I find that I'm always blocking the speaker. So I have to come up with inventive ways to hold it so I don't block it. That is a very standard complaint. Now because this is nice and aluminum, it's also very slippery. We do have a couple case options, several case options that they've included with my press kit. I would say that if you want the most protective option, you've got the sandstone black. This is the thickest one. A thing to note is that the camera does not project past it. So if you lay this flat on a desk, you shouldn't be scratching up the camera. I do wish that it had greater depth or more of a lip around here though, because you can see that it's just pushing it. I find that the only other one that is remotely protective to the camera is this Kevlar one. You can see that it just about lines up there. There's just a little bit of a lip. Any of the other ones, and this camera hump simply protrudes way past it. I wish OnePlus paid more attention to that. In the overall design, I think that the biggest bummer is going to be that there is no waterproofing whatsoever. But having some type of water resistancy is what screams premium these days. And this is one place where it definitely falls short. Although most people, even if they have a water-resistant phone, are not going to want to go anywhere near water anyway. So now let's move on to talking about specs and the most important part of a phone to me, which is performance. So we have the Snapdragon 820 SoC inside of this. You've got 4 cores clocked at 2.15 gigahertz, although they're saying up to 2.2 gigahertz. We have the Adreno 530 GPU, 6 gigabytes of RAM. Now this is something that's sticking out like a sore thumb all over the interwebs, is that this has got 6 gigabytes of RAM, but OnePlus is not allowing the phone to utilize that full 6 gigabytes of RAM. But depending on how you mod the phone's memory management, it can cache more or less apps, so you don't have to reopen them. So multitasking can vary. In this press unit, I have the cache value set to 32 instead of 20, and I find that I can get up to 9 applications open or so. So I have not found the need to mod it to having a greater value for the cache. If you do that, it ends up messing with the battery life anyway, so I think this is a happy medium. I know that OnePlus is supposed to be releasing an update, and that's probably what it's going to be, is 32. We do not have an SD card in this slot. You are limited to 64 gigabytes of internal storage, but it's got UFS 2.0 storage and it works really nicely. It's very good for the read and write speed. So launching apps has been a breeze. So I want to look at the app launching and the app switching experience, or how fast I can get applications to launch, and then once they are launched, how quickly I can switch between them. I want to compare it to something like the Galaxy S7, which also has UFS 2.0 storage. This is the Snapdragon version, not the Exynos one. I find this an interesting comparison because this does not have the greatest track record with RAM management. It's better compared to last year's Galaxy S6, but I can't get that many applications open before it starts closing them down too. Also keep in mind that my cache value is set to 32 instead of 20, so I'm able to get more applications open on this one. I get 9 or so, like I mentioned before. I'm going to cycle through several applications. Now, I'm not going to do this by myself. There's an app that does this for me. It's called Disco Mark. So I'm going to see how long each of these take to launch applications, and then in a second test, we're going to see how long they take to switch between applications. So we'll look at the multitasking. So benchmark results. I chose to keep 9 applications open because that seems to be the sweet spot where both of them aren't simply restarting the apps every single time. So this first test is looking at once all these applications are launched, is looking at the time it takes to switch between them. You can see that it's pretty close, 4.8 seconds and 3.5 seconds. This one's a little faster at switching between applications that are loaded. So you see there's a bunch of values here, and then it averages them over 5 runs and then gives you a total averaged value. So both of these do pretty well, but this is a little faster with switching. Now we're going to look at the same thing, but with each of these doing a cold start. So after leaving each application, it's going to restart them. So this is purely looking at the launch times. And you can see that to launch each of these applications over and over again, it takes a total of 6.8 seconds on the OnePlus 3 and 11.57 seconds on the Galaxy S7. So just pure launching speeds are much quicker on the OnePlus 3, I find. This just goes to show that this thing just flies. I have found the app experience to just be much quicker and more pleasant on the OnePlus 3. So yay to fast storage speeds. Sad, though, that we don't have an SD card slot, although some of you specifically asked me if you have the ability to use USB OTG. And it's hidden up here, but yes, you do. Enable OTG. So now I wanted to take a second to thank my sponsors at Amazon Prime Music so much for making content creation possible. It is now summertime, and I have been looking for music that reflects the season. Amazon has put together a summertime playlist from both new and well-known artists who have created either unique covers of well-known songs or exclusive original songs. And of course, many of the originals can be found on Prime Music as well. Prime Music is really nice because it is an added benefit that comes with your Prime membership. It is not a feature that you have to pay extra monthly for. I currently use Amazon Prime for everything, as it is, except for my rent. You can listen ad-free to over 1 million songs from top artists, and more are being added all the time. You can listen from anywhere, for example, from your computer, phone, or tablet, or even Amazon devices. I found the Songs of Summer playlist to be eclectic and unique. I really liked Kate Vogel's original Must Be Summertime. I hadn't heard of her before that. I could see me listening to this playlist on a road trip or during a pool barbecue. So try the playlist out if you haven't composed one for summer yet. Visit Amazon songsofsummer.com/Erica to listen to their entire Songs of Summer playlist. That's Amazon songsofsummer.com/Erica. Say that 10 times quickly. It's impossible. So let's talk more about performance. This is a super uber responsive feeling, very snappy phone. I don't have any complaints when it comes to performance. This thing just feels like it flies. I've been using this for several weeks now, and I don't feel like it's had any slowdowns. I don't have any complaints. Because of it being so nice and quick and snappy, it's been a complete and utter joy to use. This is the snappiest feeling phone I think that I've played with all year, or maybe ever. Really, great job, OnePlus. It rates right up there and even beyond with other great S820 devices, performance-wise. General everyday tasks perform wonderfully and games play without a hitch. I often wish that it had more than a 1080p display, but that lower resolution actually helps it in the graphics performance department, getting better frame rates than something like the Galaxy S7, for example. I'm glad to see that it also does a great job with sustained performance, meaning that I don't see thermal throttling to be an issue. Everything throttles at some point, but gladly I don't see anything drastic. So it is a true and great performer. Looking at the long-term performance test under GFX benchmark, you can see on the OnePlus 3 that we are barely losing any frames at all. 1828 only drops about 8 frames and stays there, and only drops very little at 29 iterations. Versus the Galaxy S7, you see that we start at much less because this is a Quad HD display. But looking at the throttling behavior, you're already dropping quite a bit. And then by 20 iterations, you go from 875 down to 475, so that's dropping 400 frames, which goes to show that the OnePlus 3 is doing pretty well with its sustained performance. So now talking about interface, it is very simple and smooth. This is Android version 6.0.1. It is very vanilla looking, which I enjoy, and it only has a couple exceptions to that. So right now this is the light mode that we see here. You can actually go in underneath personal customization. You can choose dark mode. Now everything is dark. I would call this a battery saving feature, and some people are touting all over XDA that yes, it does indeed work as a battery saving feature. I really like this dark mode. I think it takes advantage of the AMOLED display especially. And then when you go to the left here, instead of seeing Google Now, you see that you've got the shelf. So on the shelf, you can see that it tells you the weather in your area. You can put memos here, your most recent contacts, apps you just recently opened or used. You can put widgets here too. So I've got a calendar and then Netflix widget. I don't use that all too often, honestly. I would much prefer having Google Now here instead. It's easy to access it though, just hold down. And you can see you can pull up Google Now easily that way. So this is going to transition into the features of what this phone has. First thing I want to point out is the fingerprint sensor. This is the ceramic fingerprint sensor. This is a very, very fast fingerprint sensor. Seriously, it's like as fast and as accurate as what's on the iPhone. I barely have to touch it, and it turns on the phone and unlocks it. So bravo for that. I do notice that it's easy to get stuff kind of stuck in there though, so I'm constantly trying to fish something out. There's a bit of fuzz there. That's no biggie, but I'm someone who notices everything. You've got your notification slider that I pointed out earlier. See that it puts it in priority and then silent. You've got a personal section. You can go underneath customization. You can see that's where I turned on the dark mode. You can choose your accent color as well. I just have it under turquoise. You can also customize your LED notification colors too. I really like that you have control over your buttons. So you can choose to have an on-screen navigation bar, which I don't recommend for an AMOLED display. You can choose to swap the order of your buttons, so you can have your recent or back button. That's all your choice. You can have the backlight on for the capacitive keys or not. I like it there so that I can see where I need to put my finger. Then for the home button, you can choose a couple of actions. I have double tap to turn off the screen, long press for your search assistant. You can see I turned it off there. And then you can do the same thing for your recent and back buttons as well. So really nice to have little shortcuts. You also have options for gestures, and I love these. I use these all the time. So double tap to wake. Of course, if you need to check the time, there you go. You can draw an O to open the camera, draw a V when the display is off, turns on the flashlight, and also make a pause symbol to pause or play music. You can also draw these little carrot-looking things if you want to skip track. You're also able to program the power button to turn on the camera if you double tap it, and that works whether the display is on or off. So I find that always super handy. Then under display, you can adjust the color balance of this display. I think when it comes default, it's about here, and the white point is just very, very bluish looking. So I recommend putting it all the way to the right. Color accuracy still is not good, but this does at least make it not as bluish. You will soon be seeing an update underneath developer options. You can choose the sRGB mode, and that's going to make the display more color accurate. I will talk about this more in the display section, but you can see that that option is there, and I've had a chance to play with it. For this next thing, I turned off the dark mode, so I can show you that there's also a night mode. You can see that it just turned that white point to being incredibly kind of greenish, goldish looking. And the idea here is to cut down on the blue wavelengths, to filter out the blue wavelengths so that you don't have sleep disturbance. So that's nice. And let's not forget about ambient display, wake screen when you receive notifications. So if I get a notification, the screen's going to show in gray what that notification is. Even better though is proximity wake. So if you have your phone sitting on the desk, like so, you don't have to touch it in any way to look to see if there are any notifications or to look at the time. Just move your hand over it and you can see it gives me the time, and if there are notifications, it will show those as well. So now let's move on to taking a look at this display. This is a 1080p 401 pixel per inch AMOLED display covered with Gorilla Glass 4, 5.5 inches. Unfortunately, since it's only 1080p, that pentile matrix shows and looks hatchy. So it's not going to look as high resolution even as other 1080p displays that are not AMOLED pentile-like. But you do get that boost in graphics performance from not having so many pixels to push around. So OnePlus calls this optic AMOLED, but it really is just a current generation Samsung Super AMOLED display. Samsung makes displays with the touch layer fused together with the glass with optical adhesive. So that means that there is no air gap, more light throughput, and it can be thinner. So this whole thing is just one assembly. If you want to replace the display, it's easiest just to purchase the display assembly that has the AMOLED display, the touch layer, and the glass. Very, very thin. So it wouldn't surprise me if all the AMOLED displays that are from Samsung given to OEMs are Super AMOLED. It's just a marketing term. So OnePlus just made some of their own mods to the calibration. This is the default that it comes out with the color balance. They modded the color temp to make it way too blue, and they also made the gamma targeting around gamma 2.5, so the gamma is just way too high as well. And when you have really high gamma, not only does it dim the image, but it oversaturates it as well. So looking at the colors initially, it just looks really gaudy. It's true that the color accuracy is pretty darn horrible. But when you move the color balance all the way to the right, it does fix some things. So that white point is a little bit better. It's not as bluish. Where it was over 8,000 Kelvin, it's now more sensible. And also it looks to have an effect on the gamma as well. It's not as high anymore. But still, the color accuracy is not any good. So you've still got really oversaturated, gaudy colors. I can especially see it in the reds because the reds just look way too orangey for what they should be. This display does get pretty nice and bright though. 450 max nits is what I measured. What is nice though is that OnePlus did include a mode, an sRGB mode, so if you want to have some type of color accuracy, you can have that. So go underneath developer options, use sRGB mode, and it is a lot better. Color accuracy is a lot better. It's not going to be what you're used to with AMOLED punchy colors, because the sRGB color space is definitely not as wide as what you see with just the default AMOLED. So from my measurements, the coordinates look pretty good for the proper sRGB color space. Display gamma is around 2.4, should be 2.2, so it's still a little bit too high. Color temp is a little bit warmer than it should be on my display. People are complaining of yellowish white points once they are enabling this sRGB mode. And others are saying that theirs is completely fine. Be warned, when you go from one white point to another, it's going to take your eyes time to adjust to decide what white is again. So if you go from a very bluish white point to a warmer one, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb for a while. So I'm not saying that your display is not yellowish. It's all going to depend on the calibration of your display. Keep in mind, though, that it's typical to see variations in display calibration. I've seen a lot of the time, especially in the red, blue, and green levels. Those need to be balanced to make white. So my thoughts are, if they are using an sRGB calibration profile that's one size fits all, if that's what they're doing, and there were calibration variations to begin with out of the factory, I don't see how that profile can affect all phones the same. It's like taking a profile meant for one display and putting it on another. I think that it may or may not look good. So that could account for having a yellowish white point on some displays and not others. It all depends on how your display was before. So now at least the saturations look pretty good. You don't have any weird oversaturation going on now. So overall, this mode is not bad. I would use this mode while watching content, honestly. Otherwise, I would probably keep it with the slider all the way to the right on the saturated mode, just because I like a little bit of saturation. As a wrap-up, it's a display that has a lot of potential, and luckily you have that sRGB mode that you can go to. That has been included in the new update. And if you want to have the punchy colors, just slide your slider all the way to the right to make that white point not so horrible. So now let's move on to talking about battery life and the fast charging of this phone. So this is a 3000 milliamp hour battery inside of it. It is very thin. Because it is so thin, you are jeopardizing on not having such a large battery inside of it, but the fast charging does make up for it. So on a day-to-day basis, I can get anywhere from around 6 hours of on-screen time. That's mostly if I'm on Wi-Fi the whole day and I haven't really gone out much. But typically, if I'm being a road warrior and I'm out and about doing whatever it is I need to do, I get around 3.5 hours or more of on-screen time. I would say that more or less averaging about 4 hours of on-screen time. That's with about half brightness, using email all day long, browsing the web all day long, just essentially using this as a mobile office. Transferring between both SIM cards and Wi-Fi all day long, using the camera, watching YouTube videos. It's not that bad. It's just average, more or less. But then you've got this nice fast charger, and this is insane. This charger lets me want for nothing, basically. You plug it in a half hour it charges 60%, and it really does. In my testing, it truly does. So even if this doesn't have the greatest projected battery life, you plug it in and you just don't have to worry about it anymore. Also, what's nice about this charger is that you can charge the phone at full speed and still use the phone. It doesn't throttle. The charging speed doesn't throttle when you're playing around with the phone. It's pretty much an Oppo feature that they've ported over to this, since they're all sister companies and all. Make sure to keep this power brick with this particular cable to reap the advantages, though. What if I'm on the go, you say? Well, just purchase separate this really nice fast car charger. Get it. I recommend it. So how about the experience of using this as a phone or even connectivity purposes? So this is a dual SIM device, a dual LTE SIM device, so I can get LTE data on both slots, which is nice. So I've got my T-Mobile SIM and my AT&T SIM loaded at the same time. Now just to get it out of the way, VoLTE is available on this phone. It says enhanced 4G LTE mode. Device is VoLTE capable. So having a dual SIM phone is not necessary really, but it can be nice especially because with my T-Mobile SIM, I've got a 22 gigabyte data stash, so I can use that for data. I can use my T-Mobile SIM for data, and then everything else, such as calls or texting, because it has better reception, I can use the AT&T SIM. So it's nice. You can mess around with these: cellular data, T-Mobile, calls AT&T, and SMS AT&T. I love that feature. It works really well for me. Typically, I have two SIMs because I test two phones at the same time. But this is opening up an entirely new world for me. Now, as for Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, I haven't had any issues with my Wi-Fi, although I've been hearing issues with some bugs of connecting and reconnecting. Hopefully updates will fix all of that. GPS has been just fine for me. Call quality has been just fine. The one issue that I have had, though, is with Bluetooth. I'm not sure what it is. It looks like a bug of some kind, a battery drain bug, and I don't know if it has to do with this phone or if it's an Android thing, but when I have my little Move Now band connected to it, the battery life just plummets, so I have to keep the Bluetooth off. So I'm waiting to see if there is an update on that. Please leave your comment in the comment section below. Let me know if you've seen anything similar. Otherwise, I've had a great time with this phone, connectivity-wise. Moving on to talking a little bit about audio quality, we have a single speaker down here at the bottom. It's an okay sounding speaker. I think that it gets loud enough. It's good for speakerphone and for GPS. Not the best sounding for music. It sounds a little thin to me, a little tinny, but at least not all muffled like it sounds on the Galaxy S7 because of that waterproofing. So that's a plus. Now, I am not an audiophile, but what I'm hearing from those who are audiophiles, or at least enthusiasts, say that this has the onboard Snapdragon DAC inside of it. There is no dedicated DAC and headphone amp, so it's not going to be as good as something as the likes as the LG V10, for example. But they're saying that it sounds pretty good as far as Snapdragon DACs are concerned. The last thing that I want to talk about in this review is the camera and the camera quality, but I do want to say that I want to put this part off a little bit because I want to get the update, the 3.2 update. There's supposed to be some fixes, and I want to have the latest up-to-date review for you all. Silly me, I didn't realize that I could sideload it and have it on here already, so I'm going to go out tomorrow, take some pictures, I'll get back with you for the camera. But just for some of the specs, we have a 16 megapixel camera, f2.0 aperture, optical image stabilization, phase detection, autofocus. There's also raw image support. From what I've seen so far with this camera, I've been really happy with the picture quality. I think the colors are beautiful. They look really natural. I like the details. My biggest gripe has been, in at least daylight, that I like to take macro shots, and I'm not able to get up really close to a subject. It just won't focus. I've played around with some nighttime photos as well, and it's not as good of quality as something like the Galaxy S7, for example, but it's passable. And just my testing so far, I think that it's been perfectly great enough to use on a day-to-day basis. So now wrapping all this up, I have to thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. This is a really great phone. $400 for this guy here. It feels super, super premium. It has a nice display on it. Just put the sRGB mode. You've got a lot of really nice, cool features. The thing has incredibly fast charging. It's got everything that I would expect a good Android phone to have without any of the gimmickry involved. I also really like the camera as well. So let me know what you guys think of this. Again, this has been Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and goodbye.